Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, in the slightly overcast, high 50-degree Friday afternoon in the state of Maine. If I had my way, sunny and 65 and 70 with no humidity, every day, maybe a little rain after midnight, that's what we'd have, day in and day out. Fortunately, I'm not in charge of such things, and I'm sure somebody would find fault with it. Who knows? People that jog after midnight, maybe. I have failed, and I have to tell you the story. I've had a good run. It's been a long time, but I had a transmission come back, leaking. I pride myself on one hand and am leery on the other. I tell everybody that leaves with a transmission, I'm overdue to make a big mistake, because I'm only human, right? I've had a good run. But seriously, I only work on pretty much one model of transmission. You get pretty good at it after a while. There's always room to learn something, and that's what happened in this case. It was last year. I was asked by a guy that runs a shop. He had a customer that had a Trouble 400 behind a big block Ford in a truck, and they'd bought a full manual transmission somewhere else, and they wanted it to shift automatically. And they'd been told it couldn't be done. So I agreed with the stipulation that I would need to take the whole thing apart to see what it's made out of and to make sure my modifications were going to stick and it was going to work the first time. And I accomplished that. They put it back in, it shifted automatic, everybody happy. They pull it out of storage this year, and it's spraying pressurized fluid out the vent tube. Now, the vent tube was not the stock plastic one. It was this piece of brake line, piece of flared brake line. It was set in the case, everything. I saw no reason to change it, and I wasn't doing 100% build of my own. If you've watched me do it, I always drill and tap the vent. I got the case completely stripped out. I do all my normal modifications. This wasn't that job. In fact, I wouldn't have had to do anything but convert it to automatic shifting if I hadn't noticed the flexible dipstick, which I despise so much, was marked wrong. The fluid was way low, and all the clutches were burned right out of it. So I had to put clutches in it, seals, typical stuff, but I still wasn't doing 100% build, and this is where I have to take responsibility because I went wrong. I let myself down for not sticking with my normal plan. I left this vent in place. It looked pretty innocent, and it was until whatever happened over the winter. I couldn't figure out what was wrong at first. My first thought was internally in the pump. Must be putting pressurized fluid into the vent cavity. If you look at the manual, the vent cavity on both halves of the Turbo 400 pump, it's a pretty big piece. I mean, it goes all the way across the top half. It's feasible that pressurized oil could find its way in there. That's the most likely suspect. When I split the pump in half, inside the vent cavity, it was dry cast iron. It has not had any oil in it. The rest of the pump was red oil. The vent cavity was dry. Now what? Because I need to nail this, when it goes back, it needs to be right. So keep looking. That's all you can do. First I was studying the pump gasket, and I saw an indentation of that flare. And believe it or not, because in a Turbo 400, pressurized fluid is a long way from the vent. It's down here, and the vent's way up here, but the cooler out and return are pretty close. What was happening is this made an indentation in the gasket and must have been holding the pump up just enough that in, 6 months, 8 months later, it could find its way up. It had to travel up and out the vent, because this was wet on one end and pretty much dryish on this end, but the pump cavity was dry anyway. So it took me a few hours to figure it out. And then at some point you have to, believe your findings and continue on. In this case, I wasn't stripping the entire transmission apart because that's what I do when I drill and tap. So I'm going to get metal everywhere. So I put a stock plastic vent in it, put it back together, waited anxiously while they picked it up and installed it, and fortunately, dry as a bone. And that was a week and a half ago. So I think I haven't told the story in a week and a half because, it still haunts me. But I think it turned out to be a success story. I didn't charge them for it, even though they fully expected to pay. They weren't asking for a freebie because they know the deal. I mean, I didn't build the entire transmission, but I feel I should have caught that. So that's the way it is. Only human. You learn something every day. I have been shopping for a hydraulic lift cart for a couple years. Lifting transmissions up on the bench and getting them into the transmission fixture used to be a lot easier. I mean, I can still do it. Still plenty strong. However, it takes its toll on you. And eventually you're going to mess up your back because you didn't stretch out first, or lots of good reasons to finally get one. I have the bench rigged up with the crane, and I can use the engine crane in other areas, but it's not always convenient. Now, they make a 500-pound unit and a 1,000-pound unit. The 1,000-pound unit lifts higher. That's what I should have got. But it's also bigger. And I need something that I can maneuver really easy. So I settled, mostly because Jegs had these on sale for like $250 shipped. Typically, they're so big, they charge you oversized shipping. And Harbor Freight has been out of them for a while. Every time I think to look for one, they're out of stock. And they're about the same money. So, long story short, I bought this one. It showed up, I stuck it together, and I've used it all week. And I'm loving it. It's not perfect, but it works. It's not too much higher than the roll-around carts that I use to store transmissions on. So it's pretty easy to go from there to there. It goes perfect up against the tailgate or the back of the Suburban to slide stuff in and out. We're going to do that in a minute. And on my big fab bench, it's the right height to slide right into the transmission fixture. I haven't tried the other ones, but it's close enough where you can, maneuver it up in there. It's not lifting all the way from the floor. Yesterday, I scooted down to coastal New Hampshire, Seabrook, New Hampshire to be exact, and picked up 2 brake drum Turbo 400s. I suspect at least one of them is not a 475. I've mentioned before, if it has 16-inch wheels, it's a regular Turbo 400 with a brake drum. If it has 19.5 wheels, 14,000 GVW, compared to the 10,000 with the 16-inch wheels, you got yourself a Turbo 400. But either way, I got a really good deal on these. They still had the converters stuck in them. They're outside temporarily. One has a dipstick, one doesn't. So this one I'm going to take apart first. But as far as unloading, it's now a lot easier, because sometimes getting them out of the back of the Bourbon with the gate up there, not always that easy. I followed the directions to the guy's neighborhood. His house was easy to spot because he was the guy with all the stuff, if you know what I'm talking about. I pulled in, and the next thing I saw made me really happy. This guy was stout. He was not going to have a problem helping me lift these into my truck. If you show up, you got a hunched over old man with a cane, you're loading the thing by yourself. This guy had to hold him back and put him in by himself. That could not have gone any easier. Now I just let it down and wheel it in the man door. If I wanted to, I could go the other direction, too wide. I put 2 on here, but I think I'll do one at a time. Not bad. I just got to shove it in there. That'll work. This is the first time you're witnessing it live as it happens. Well, not really live, but you know what I'm saying. I'm learning. We're learning. This one is a 1988. It's marked Pro-Built or Rebuilt. The number on it had that non-rusted converter in it, so I believe something's been done to it. The other one's probably original. It's a 1989. But both nice and clean, typical motorhome. Hardly even rusted. Can't wait to see what's inside. I went on another parts mission the other night. Dragged home this 1956 Chevy wagon door for $25. If I can get one part out of it, I get my money back. I'm hoping to be able to use parts out of the vent window. Maybe the inside handles and stuff, but I mean, it's rough, but people get crazy money for this stuff. The same reason I loaded up this 55 Chevy Fender for 20 bucks. Either it'll be sold at a swap meet somewhere, if I can even use that little bracket on the bottom. Who knows, but even if for art, hanging on the wall, definitely worth 20 bucks. And for the frosting on the cake, this morning, I went to my favorite speed shop, my buddy Ken's house, and I've explained it before, but it's some kind of undiagnosed sickness. But if I have like an engine block, I'm gonna shop for parts for it. So the dummy one-piece sealed block that's sitting in the 56 wagon, it came with a few pieces, but not enough to put a lower end together. So that now has a forged Eagle crankshaft, 348 strokes, so it's going to be a 350. I have a set of 30 over forged pistons, so it'll be a 355. And that'll get a set of Eagle H-beam rods that came with the block, if you can keep up. So that's, in my mind, a complete lower end. It's going to have to be balanced. And I mean, we're a long ways from assembling it, but that's a project. I had one other 4-bolt block kicking around, and I was halfway there to doing something else. So this morning at Ken's, I got a cast 3.75 stroke crank. I already had a set of 30 over 4-inch bore pistons, so that makes a 383. I have a set of Manley I-beam rods that I bought this morning from Ken as well, along with a few other trinkets. So that will be 2 more small blocks someday. There's no sense keeping it around if you're not going to do something with it. So that's that. So when I showed up to get those 2 transmissions yesterday morning, and the big rugged guy came out, and he's got a whole yard full of stuff, and we were like brothers right off the bat. But he had just taken a deposit on a complete, somewhat rusty 70 Nova. Vinyl top 70 Nova. So it had all the trim that I need for my 72. It had all around the windshield, the windows, everything. And he just sold it for 700 bucks. I'm happy to get the transmissions, but left feeling, and I told him if that deal falls through, let me know. I'll come back with my trailer and I'll haul the whole thing home. And it had a back seat. I don't have a good back seat to recover to put in my 71, but as I was coming back from Ken's Speed Shop this morning, I got a message from a guy who I'd messaged yesterday, next town over. He has, for 50 bucks, a rear seat for a 2-door Nova. So I'll go get that, and someday in the future, because I need to finish the interior on the 71. That's all that's holding me back from driving it. I'll reupholster that seat and put it in it. That car has a green dash and a green bench seat. I bought a green headliner, but I determined after I bought the green headliner that everything else I put in it, I already have black door panels and black sail panels. I'm going to go ahead and just put everything black. Black and green goes fine together, and eventually it'll be all black if I change the seat in the dash. So, but I don't think black and green will be a bad contrast. So now you're updated. I just saw the FedEx truck pull out, so I got more parts. And next we'll be back talking about the 377 and the 421. I'm going to work on that a little more. It's coming along, not without complications. I'm probably the complication, but that's okay. Have a great day. Talk to you in a few.